Vancouver, with its skyline of glass and steel, was a city that Marco had grown to love. It had been his home for years, a place of countless memories, both beautiful and painful. But now, it was a city of solitude for him, a place where he wandered the streets aimlessly, lost in the echoes of a past relationship that had left his heart shattered. It had been a few months since the breakup, a few months of sleepless nights and endless days of self-doubt. Marco had always been a romantic at heart, and when he fell hard. The woman he had thought was the one had abruptly walked out of his life, leaving him in a state of emotional disarray. His friends, well-meaning but ultimately unable to fully understand his pain, had urged him to move on. They pushed him to explore the world of dating apps, a world he had been skeptical of. But in the end, he relented, thinking that perhaps this was the way to heal his wounded heart. One evening, sitting alone in his favorite coffee shop, Marco reluctantly downloaded Bumble, a dating app he had heard about from a friend. His finger hovered over the screen as he created his profile, trying to capture the essence of who he was, without revealing the vulnerability that lurked beneath his cheerful exterior. As he scrolled through profiles, he saw faces of potential matches flash before him. Some were attractive, some intriguing, and some outright bizarre. He swiped left more often than right, feeling like he was sifting through a catalog of strangers. But then, as he was about to close the app, he stumbled upon a profile that made him pause. It belonged to a woman named Consuela. Her profile picture was captivating, a snapshot of her standing against a backdrop of the Vancouver skyline, her dark hair flowing in the breeze. Her eyes held a hint of mystery, and her smile was both inviting and enigmatic. Marco couldn't help but be drawn to her. He read her profile, which described her as a lover of art, nature, and adventure. She spoke of her passion for hiking in the mountains and her love for exploring the hidden gems of the city. It seemed like they had common interests, and her words resonated with him on a level he hadn't expected. With a sense of apprehension mixed with curiosity, Marco swiped right on Consuela's profile, initiating a connection. He watched as the screen displayed, "It's a match!" A surge of excitement mixed with anxiety coursed through him. Could this be the beginning of something new? A chance to heal his wounded heart? Little did Marco know that this seemingly innocuous swipe would set into motion a series of events that would lead him down a dark and treacherous path, one he could never have imagined in his wildest nightmares. The days turned into weeks as Marco and Consuela's online connection deepened. Their chats on Bumble evolved into lengthy conversations that flowed seamlessly. Marco found himself eagerly checking his phone for her messages, his heart beating a little faster each time he saw her name pop up on the screen. Their discussions ranged from the mundane to the profound. They talked about their favorite restaurants in Vancouver, the beauty of the local parks, and their shared love for Mexican cuisine. Marco was surprised to learn that Consuela had Mexican heritage, just like him. She spoke with pride about her family's roots in the vibrant state of Oaxaca, and their shared cultural connection brought them even closer. One chilly evening, Marco decided it was time to take their virtual connection to the real world. He mustered the courage to suggest meeting in person. His fingers trembled as he typed out the message, "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? I'd love to meet you." Consuela's response was almost immediate, and it contained an enthusiastic yes. She suggested a cozy cafe nestled in the heart of Vancouver's historic Gastown district. Marco agreed, and they set a date for their first meeting. The days leading up to their rendezvous were a whirlwind of emotions for Marco. He couldn't help but imagine what Consuela would be like in person. Would she be as enchanting as she seemed in her profile picture? Would her smile still hold that captivating mystery? He was filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, wondering if this encounter might be the start of something beautiful. The day finally arrived, and Marco found himself standing outside the quaint cafe, its facade adorned with ivy-covered walls. The air was crisp, and he could see his breath as he waited. He had arrived early, as was his habit, to ensure he didn't keep her waiting. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as Marco fidgeted with his phone, checking the time and glancing at the passers-by. And then he saw her. Consuela approached the cafe, a vision of grace and elegance. Her dark hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes sparkled as they locked onto his. As they greeted each other with warm smiles and an embrace, Marco felt an electric charge in the air. He couldn't help but be captivated by her presence. They settled into a corner of the cafe, the cozy ambiance amplifying the intimacy of the moment. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it had online. They spoke of their dreams and aspirations, their favorite books and movies, and the adventures they longed to embark on. Consuela's laughter was like a melodic tune, filling the air with an enchanting energy that drew Marco in deeper. As the hours passed, Marco and Consuela realized they had lost track of time. It was as if the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just the two of them in their own little bubble of connection. The cafe's staff discreetly dimmed the lights as the evening sun dipped below the horizon. Finally, when the moment came to part ways, Marco couldn't help but feel a pang of longing. Consuela, however, reassured him with a warm smile and a promise to see him again soon. As they exchanged goodbyes, Marco walked away from that cafe with a heart that felt a little less heavy, a heart that dared to hope that he had found something special in the midst of his pain. Little did Marco know that the enchanting world he had just entered was filled with secrets, and the captivating woman he had met would soon lead him down a path he could never have imagined. In the days that followed Marco and Consuela's first enchanting meeting, their connection deepened at an astonishing pace. They were inseparable, spending every available moment together, exploring Vancouver's hidden gems and indulging in their shared love for art and adventure. Marco's initial apprehensions had faded into a distant memory, replaced by a sense of elation he hadn't felt in years. Their second date was an art gallery excursion. Marco was struck by Consuela's passion for creativity and her profound knowledge of local artists. She seemed like a connoisseur of beauty, effortlessly discussing the intricate details and emotions evoked by each painting. As they stood before a mesmerizing abstract piece, Consuela's hand brushed against Marco's, sending shivers down his spine. "Art has a way of revealing hidden truths," she whispered, her gaze locked onto the canvas. Marco couldn't help but feel that her words held a deeper significance, as if they were a secret message meant only for him. Their third date was a spontaneous hike in the nearby mountains. Consuela led the way with the confidence of someone who knew the trails intimately. Marco, though not an experienced hiker, found himself entranced by her adventurous spirit and determination. She guided him through rugged terrain, the air filled with the scent of pine and the sound of rustling leaves. At the summit, with a breathtaking view of Vancouver sprawled out below them, Marco realized just how far he had come since his heartbreak. Consuela had breathed new life into him, and he couldn't help but believe that this connection was meant to heal the wounds of the past. As their dates continued, Marco noticed that Consuela's allure was not just skin deep. She was an enigma, a complex tapestry of contradictions. She could be both incredibly caring and distant, at times sharing intimate stories from her past, while at others deflecting personal questions with a playful smile. Marco was drawn to her like a moth to a flame, unable to resist the mystery that surrounded her. One evening, while sharing a bottle of red wine in her cozy apartment, Consuela opened up about her own heartbreaks. She spoke of past relationships that had left scars on her soul, relationships that had left her wary of love. Marco listened, feeling a deep sense of empathy for her pain. He was determined to be the one who mended her broken heart, just as she had mended his. But beneath the surface, there were moments of unease. Marco noticed that Consuela had a tendency to become distant and contemplative at times, her eyes clouded with thoughts she didn't share. He brushed it off as the natural complexities of getting to know someone new, convincing himself that he was overthinking things. One evening, as they lounged on her balcony, gazing at the city lights, Consuela suggested they try a special cocktail she had learned to make during her travels in Mexico. It was a sweet and spicy concoction, and Marco savored the flavors as he sipped it. Unbeknownst to him, this innocent drink would mark the beginning of a nightmarish descent into the unknown. As the evening wore on, Marco's vision began to blur, and his limbs felt heavy. He tried to speak, to ask Consuela what was happening, but his words slurred and became incomprehensible. Panic surged through him as he realized he was losing control of his body. Consuela, with a chilling smile that sent shivers down Marco's spine, whispered, "Sleep now, my love." you'll wake up in a new world. The world around Marco spiraled into darkness as he slipped into unconsciousness, his last thoughts filled with dread and confusion. Little did he know that the woman he had fallen for so deeply harbored a malevolence that would lead him into a nightmarish ordeal from which there might be no escape. Darkness enveloped Marco's consciousness as he drifted in and out of a drug-induced slumber. The transition between reality and the haze of unconsciousness was disorienting, like trying to navigate a labyrinth blindfolded. Flickers of memories and sensations danced at the edge of his mind, leaving him with a haunting sense of foreboding. When Marco finally regained some semblance of awareness, he found himself in an unfamiliar place. The room he was in was dimly lit, with heavy curtains blocking out any trace of natural light. The air was stifling, heavy with an acrid scent that made his stomach churn. Panic surged through him as he realized he was no longer in the cozy familiarity of Consuela's apartment. He attempted to move, but his limbs felt like lead, unresponsive to his commands. It was as if his body had betrayed him, leaving him powerless and vulnerable. The realization hit him like a wave of icy water. He had been drugged, incapacitated, and taken to a place he couldn't identify. Marco's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to make sense of his surroundings. The room was sparsely furnished, the walls adorned with strange, abstract paintings that seemed to writhe and contort in the dim light. He tried to call out, but his voice emerged as nothing more than a hoarse whisper. The minutes turned into hours as Marco lay there, his mind racing with 1,000 questions and fears. Where was he? What had happened to Consuela, the woman he had thought he could trust? Why had she brought him here? The answers eluded him, shrouded in the obscurity of the room. Eventually, exhaustion overcame his fear, and Marco drifted into an uneasy sleep. His dreams were fragmented and nightmarish, filled with images of shadowy figures and distant screams. Each time he awoke, he was met with the same suffocating darkness, his disorientation intensifying with every passing moment. As the hours stretched into what felt like days, Marco's sense of time blurred. He had no way to gauge how long he had been confined to this place, his existence reduced to a mere whisper in the void. Desperation gnawed at him, and he vowed to find a way out, to escape from this nightmarish limbo. Marco's first glimmer of hope came when he heard faint sounds beyond the walls of his prison. The muffled voices of people conversing, the distant hum of traffic. They were like lifelines connecting him to the outside world. With renewed determination, he began to assess his surroundings. He realized that his captivity was not just limited to the room. The door, which had been concealed in the shadows, was locked from the outside. The windows were heavily fortified, rendering any escape attempt futile. Marco's heart sank as he confronted the grim reality that he was trapped in this secluded place, cut off from the world. But Marco was not one to surrender easily. Despite his weakened state, he began to search the room for any potential means of escape. He examined every nook and cranny, every crevice in the walls, and every piece of furniture for clues or weaknesses. It was a slow and painstaking process, but he was fueled by a determination to survive and unravel the mystery of his captivity. In the midst of his search, Marco stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the floor. With trembling hands, he pried it open to reveal a collection of handwritten notes and old photographs. The contents of this hidden cache sent shivers down his spine, hinting at a darkness far deeper than he could have imagined. As he continued to investigate, Marco realized that the key to his survival lay not only in deciphering the enigma of this room, but also in confronting the secrets of the woman he had fallen for, Consuela. The woman who had once seemed like an enchantress was now the source of his greatest fear. With newfound determination, Marco vowed to unravel the mysteries surrounding his captivity and to confront the sinister truth that lurked in the shadows of this secluded house. Little did he know that the path to enlightenment would be fraught with danger, and the woman who had ensnared him was far more dangerous than he could have ever conceived. Days turned into weeks as Marco continued to explore every facet of his confinement, trying to piece together the enigma surrounding Consuela and the sinister house that held him captive. Each moment in that dimly lit room was a torturous journey through the labyrinth of his own mind, fraught with uncertainty and dread. His search of the hidden compartment yielded a collection of notes and photographs that hinted at Consuela's past. The notes were handwritten in a language that he couldn't decipher, but the intensity of the words and the scribbled sketches suggested a depth of emotion that left him unsettled. Among the photographs, Marco found snapshots of Consuela, her family, and friends. In some, she appeared as a carefree young woman, laughing and embracing life. In others, her eyes held a darkness, a sorrow that seemed to penetrate the very essence of the photograph. Faces of men from her past appeared frequently, their expressions ranging from joy to anguish. Marco couldn't help but wonder about the significance of these images. Were they clues to Consuela's true nature, or were they fragments of a life left behind? The mystery only deepened, leaving him with more questions than answers. As the days passed, Marco's senses sharpened, attuned to the slightest sound or vibration that might offer a glimpse into the outside world. He listened intently to the conversations he could hear through the walls, trying to piece together the identities of those who frequented the house. The voices that drifted to him were those of strangers, and he couldn't discern any patterns or consistency in their comings and goings. At times he thought he heard footsteps approaching his door, sending his heart racing. He would huddle in a corner of the room, desperate to remain hidden, unsure if his captor was about to enter or if it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. The fear of Consuela's return was a constant, looming presence in his mind. Marco's hunger gnawed at him, as he had been given little sustenance during his captivity. The meager meals that were pushed through a small opening in the door barely sustained him. It was clear that Consuela was controlling every aspect of his existence, keeping him in a state of perpetual vulnerability. In the stillness of those long, dark nights, Marco's thoughts turned to his friends and family. He knew they must be searching for him, wondering what had become of him. The thought of their worry and anguish weighed heavily on him, and he vowed to do whatever it took to survive and reunite with them. Desperation and determination fueled Marco's resolve to escape. He began to systematically dismantle the room, using the tools he could find to pry open the door's lock. Each attempt was met with failure, and he bore the physical and emotional scars of his efforts. Despite the relentless darkness of his confinement, Marco's mind remained sharp. He developed a sense of time based on the sounds beyond his prison walls, the faint echoes of footsteps and voices that marked the passing days. He also continued to pore over the notes and photographs, hoping to find a clue that would lead him to the truth. One evening, as Marco examined a particularly cryptic note, he noticed a series of dates and locations scrawled in the margin. They appeared to be coordinates, and a glimmer of hope ignited within him. Could these coordinates lead him to answers? To freedom? Marco's determination reached a fever pitch. He was resolved to escape this nightmare and confront Consuela, to unearth the secrets of her past and the reasons behind his captivity. The whispered voices, the cryptic notes, and the photographs of her past were all pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve, no matter the cost. As Marco clung to the hope of deciphering the coordinates and escaping the clutches of his captor, he knew that the path ahead would be treacherous and fraught with danger. The woman who had ensnared him was not just a captor, she was a predator, and Marco was determined to become the hunter in this deadly game of survival. The discovery of the coordinates etched into Consuela's cryptic note had ignited a spark of hope within Marco's heart. They represented a lifeline, a possible means of escape from the oppressive darkness of his captivity. With newfound determination, he embarked on a relentless journey to decipher their meaning. Night after night, as the dimly lit room provided little solace, Marco meticulously studied the note, cross-referencing the coordinates with any clues he could find. He memorized them, etching the numbers into his memory like a lifeline. It was a puzzle that consumed his thoughts, a lifeline that promised freedom. Days turned into weeks as Marco meticulously pieced together the clues. It became evident that the coordinates corresponded to locations in Vancouver, and they seemed to form a cryptic trail leading through the city. This was the lifeline he had been searching for, the means to break free from his captor's grasp. In his confinement, Marco had not only become a prisoner of the room, but also a prisoner of his own mind. The isolation, the uncertainty, and the fear had taken a toll on his psyche. He found himself having conversations with imaginary allies and foes, a coping mechanism to stave off the encroaching loneliness. The room's dim light played tricks on his perception, and he began to see shadows move and shift in the corners of his vision. The once comforting silence became an eerie symphony of whispers and distant echoes. Marco struggled to distinguish between reality and hallucination, his grip on sanity slipping with each passing day. Yet the coordinates remained his tether to the real world, a reminder that there was a path out of this living nightmare. Marco meticulously charted the locations they pointed to, identifying key landmarks and potential escape routes. He had become a cartographer of his own salvation. As he delved deeper into his plan, Marco knew that Consuela's return was an ever-present threat. He had to be vigilant, to act swiftly when the opportunity presented itself. The fear of her malevolence fueled his determination to outwit her and bring an end to his captivity. One evening, as Marco was in the midst of mapping out his escape, he heard a sound that sent a chill down his spine, the distinct creak of the door unlocking. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to hide the evidence of his plotting. The room's heavy curtains concealed his actions as he feigned disorientation. The door swung open, and Consuela entered, her enigmatic smile intact. "My love, I've missed you," she cooed, as if they were simply reuniting after a brief separation. Marco, his heart pounding, struggled to maintain his composure. She approached him, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Her touch was both tender and sinister as she caressed his cheek. "You've been so naughty trying to escape," she whispered, her breath hot against his ear. The fear that had been building within Marco reached a crescendo. He knew that this confrontation could be a turning point, a chance to outmaneuver Consuela and make his escape. With the coordinates burned into his memory, he resolved to bide his time, to play the role of the captive lover until the opportune moment arrived. Days turned into weeks once more as Marco played a dangerous game of deception. He feigned compliance, his every action a calculated move to lull Consuela into a false sense of security. He listened attentively to her conversations, hoping to glean any information that might aid his escape. During one of their conversations, Marco managed to extract a piece of vital information: Consuela's fascination with art and the locations of her favorite galleries in Vancouver. It was a revelation that could potentially serve as a key to his escape plan. As Marco's charade continued, he couldn't help but wonder about Consuela's motives. What had driven her to become a captor, a predator of vulnerable men? The pieces of her past that he had uncovered hinted at a darkness within her, a darkness he was determined to confront. In the oppressive confines of his prison, Marco's resolve remained unshaken. The coordinates remained his beacon of hope, guiding him towards a reckoning with his captor and a desperate bid for freedom. He knew that the path ahead was treacherous, that his sanity teetered on the brink, but he was determined to emerge from this ordeal not as a victim, but as a survivor. As Marco continued to play the role of the captive lover, he knew that his escape plan hinged on the knowledge he had gained about Consuela's fascination with art and the coordinates that seemed to lead to various galleries in Vancouver. Each day, he meticulously honed his plan, analyzing the details he had collected and plotting the best course of action. His makeshift map, scrawled on a piece of paper hidden beneath the mattress, had become a labyrinth of lines and symbols. The coordinates formed a web of possibilities, each location a potential piece of the puzzle. He studied the layout of each gallery, considering their opening hours, security measures, and the potential for hiding places. But Marco was aware that his captor, Consuela, remained unpredictable. Her demeanor shifted between affectionate and menacing, and he couldn't decipher her true intentions. It was as though he was navigating not only the physical labyrinth of the galleries, but also the emotional labyrinth of deceit that she wove around him. The room's oppressive darkness and isolation continued to take a toll on Marco's sanity. He was haunted by nightmares of the past, memories of his lost love, and the specter of Consuela's malevolence. He feared that he might descend further into madness before he had the chance to escape. One day, as Consuela left the room to attend to some undisclosed task, Marco seized the opportunity to further his escape preparations. He retrieved a shard of glass he had concealed and used it to etch a hidden message on the back of the large painting that adorned one of the room's walls. It was a message meant for any potential rescuers, a plea for help that he hoped would one day be discovered. The message, barely visible in the dim light, read, "I am held captive. Coordinates lead to escape. Beware of her deceit." Marco knew that leaving such a message was risky, but it was a desperate gamble, a lifeline he could offer to anyone who might uncover the truth. As the days passed, Marco's physical strength waned due to his limited diet and the strain of his confinement. His only solace was the thought of the escape plan he had meticulously crafted. He had learned to endure the torment of uncertainty, to harness his fear and anxiety as fuel for his determination. Consuela's visits became increasingly infrequent, leaving Marco with precious moments of solitude to fine-tune his plan. He practiced feigning compliance, hiding his preparations behind a facade of submission. He knew that the moment he revealed his intentions, he would risk Consuela's wrath, and his chances of escape would diminish. One evening, as Consuela entered the room, her demeanor was different. She seemed agitated, her eyes filled with a mix of anxiety and desperation. She approached Marco with an intensity he had not seen before, her grip on his arm almost bruising. "Listen to me carefully," she hissed, her voice quivering. "We need to leave this place, both of us. There are people who want to hurt us." Marco's heart raced as he listened to her words. It was a sudden and unexpected twist, and he couldn't help but wonder if this was another layer of deception. But her fear appeared genuine, and he realized that this might be the opportunity he had been waiting for. Consuela revealed a plan of her own, a plan to escape the clutches of those who pursued her. She spoke of a hidden network of allies who could help them disappear into the shadows. It was a perilous path, fraught with danger, but it offered a chance at freedom. As Marco contemplated Consuela's proposition, he knew that he had to make a choice. Should he place his trust in a woman who had been his captor in the hope of a shared escape? Or should he continue to secretly pursue his own plan, guided by the coordinates that held the promise of a different kind of freedom? The decision weighed heavily on Marco's shoulders as he navigated the treacherous labyrinth of deceit, unsure of whom to trust and what lay ahead. The room, once his prison, had become a crucible of choices, each one carrying consequences that could alter the course of his fate. In the days that followed Consuela's revelation about a possible escape plan, Marco found himself torn between two paths. The coordinates he had deciphered still held the promise of a route to freedom that he could control, while Consuela's proposal offered a chance at escape, albeit one shrouded in uncertainty and danger. As Marco contemplated his options, he observed a profound change in Consuela's demeanor. She seemed increasingly desperate, her anxiety growing with each passing day. She would spend hours on the phone, speaking in hushed tones and casting furtive glances in his direction. Marco's instincts warned him that something was amiss. He couldn't shake the feeling that Consuela was not being entirely honest about the nature of the threat they faced. He knew he had to tread carefully, to gather more information before committing to any course of action. Using the glass shard he had hidden, Marco continued to etch hidden messages on the back of the large painting that adorned the room's wall. These messages were not just a plea for help, but also a record of his observations and doubts about Consuela's true intentions. One evening, as Consuela was on the phone, Marco overheard fragments of her conversation. She spoke of a plan, of rendezvous points, and of people she referred to as allies. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and Marco realized that Consuela was involved in something far more sinister than he had imagined. Fear clung to him like a shadow as he considered the possibility that Consuela might be a part of a criminal network, one that was using him as a pawn in their schemes. The knowledge that he was entangled in a web of deceit pushed him further toward the decision to pursue his own escape plan. With each passing day, Marco's preparations grew more urgent. He continued to map out the locations indicated by the coordinates, studying every detail of the galleries, their surroundings, and the potential escape routes. He also cataloged any security measures in place, hoping to evade detection during his escape. Consuela, meanwhile, remained oblivious to Marco's secret preparations. Her focus was consumed by her own plans, and she seemed to be unraveling before his eyes. Her desperate actions and erratic behavior only solidified his resolve to distance himself from her. One fateful evening, as Marco made final adjustments to his escape plan, Consuela's agitation reached a breaking point. She burst into the room, her eyes wild with fear, and grabbed Marco by the shoulders. "We have to leave now," she urged, her voice trembling. Marco's heart raced as he realized that Consuela's allies, the people she had spoken of, were closing in. He knew he had to act swiftly, to seize this opportunity for escape while he still could. Consuela handed him a bag containing supplies, and they hurriedly made their way through a labyrinthine network of passages within the house. Marco was acutely aware that this might be the moment of truth, a chance to break free from captivity and the web of deceit that had ensnared him. But as they approached the exit, Consuela's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She seemed to be leading him into a trap, and the fear that had once gripped Marco now turned into a searing panic. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. With a surge of determination, Marco veered off the path Consuela was leading him down and followed a corridor that he hoped would take him closer to one of the coordinates he had mapped out. His heart pounded in his chest as he left Consuela behind, uncertain of what lay ahead. As he moved through the darkened corridors, the echoes of his footsteps were a constant reminder of the perilous journey he had embarked upon. Marco was no longer just a captive. He was a fugitive, racing against time and an unknown adversary. His senses were heightened, every sound, every shadow, a potential threat. He knew that he had to trust in the coordinates, to follow their path to an uncertain but hopeful future. The final standoff had begun, and Marco was determined to emerge from the shadows, free from the deceit and danger that had ensnared him. Marco's desperate flight through the labyrinthine passages of the house was a harrowing journey into the unknown. The dimly lit corridors twisted and turned, each one leading him deeper into the heart of the mysterious structure. His heart raced with each step, and the fear that he had narrowly escaped Consuela's trap gnawed at his every thought. The coordinates he had deciphered served as his guiding star, leading him through a bewildering maze of passages and stairwells. His path took him through hidden chambers and long-forgotten alcoves, each one revealing a new layer of the house's enigma. It was as though the very walls held secrets that beckoned him forward. Marco's senses were on high alert, his ears strained to catch any sound that might signal pursuit. The house itself seemed to be alive with creaks and murmurs, as though it were conspiring to keep him captive. He knew that he was not alone within its confines, that Consuela's allies lurked in the shadows. The first of the coordinates led Marco to a room filled with antiquities and relics from around the world. Ancient artifacts lined the shelves, their significance lost to time. It was a surreal encounter with history, a reminder that he was trapped in a place that held secrets far older and darker than he could imagine. Marco's escape had transformed into a treacherous game of cat and mouse. He was acutely aware that he was being pursued, that every step he took brought him closer to danger. The sense of urgency pushed him forward, his determination unwavering as he clung to the hope of reaching the final set of coordinates. As he navigated the labyrinth of passages, Marco discovered hidden messages etched into the walls. They were cryptic symbols and phrases, like breadcrumbs left by those who had ventured into the house before him. The messages hinted at the dangers that lurked within and the enigma that surrounded Consuela. One particular message sent shivers down Marco's spine. It read, "Beware the siren's call, for within her beauty lies a darkness that consumes." It was a chilling warning, one that echoed his own suspicions about Consuela's true nature. He knew that he had to remain vigilant, that the allure of her beauty was a facade that concealed a malevolent soul. Hours turned into days as Marco's relentless journey continued. His body grew weary, his mind clouded with exhaustion. But he pressed on. The final set of coordinates drew him closer to his goal, to the hope of reaching safety beyond the house's walls. As he rounded a corner, he stumbled upon a hidden passage that seemed to lead deeper into the bowels of the house. The air grew colder, and the sound of his footsteps echoed ominously. He knew that he was on the right path, that the coordinates were guiding him toward an escape he had longed for. But as he ventured deeper into the passage, he realized that he was not alone. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, blocking his path. It was Consuela, her eyes filled with a chilling mix of desperation and anger. "You should have trusted me," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I was trying to save us. Marco's heart pounded as he confronted the woman who had held him captive, the woman whose motives remained a dark mystery. He knew that this final confrontation would determine the course of his fate, that he had to make a choice that could mean life or death. With the coordinates burning in his memory and the weight of his captivity behind him, Marco faced Consuela in a battle of wills and wits. The labyrinth's end was within sight, and he was determined to break free from the shadows and deceit that had ensnared him for far too long. The tense standoff between Marco and Consuela in the shadowy depths of the house had reached a critical juncture. Each of them stood on opposite sides of the passage, their fates hanging in the balance. Marco's determination to escape clashed with Consuela's desperation to keep him within her grasp. Consuela's eyes bore into Marco's, and he could see the conflict within her, a battle between the malevolence that had imprisoned him and the fear of a threat that loomed larger than her control over him. In that moment, he recognized her not only as a captor but as a victim of her own circumstances. "You don't understand," Consuela pleaded, her voice trembling. "They won't let us leave. They'll kill us both if we try." Marco's mind raced as he considered the implications of Consuela's words. It seemed that she too had fallen victim to a sinister force that held sway over her life. The enigmatic allies she had mentioned were not saviors, but puppeteers, manipulating her as much as they had manipulated him. With cautious skepticism, Marco asked, "Who are they, Consuela? What do they want from us?" She hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. "I can't tell you everything now, but I promise I will explain when the time is right. We need to trust each other." Trust was a fragile concept in the twisted world they had found themselves in, and Marco knew that his decision would carry immense consequences. He considered the coordinates, the lifeline to freedom that he had meticulously uncovered. But he also considered the possibility that Consuela's warning held truth, that their escape could lead to deadly consequences. A sudden noise from deeper within the passage shattered the fragile truce between them. It was the sound of approaching footsteps, echoing ominously in the dimly lit corridor. Panic washed over Marco as he realized that their pursuers were closing in. "We need to move," he urged Consuela, his voice urgent. "If we stay here, we'll be caught." With a reluctant nod, Consuela reluctantly began to lead Marco deeper into the passage, away from the approaching threat. The dark, winding corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, and the air grew colder with each step. It was a journey into the unknown, fraught with danger and uncertainty. As they moved through the labyrinthine passages, Marco couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, that their every move was being monitored by an unseen force. He questioned Consuela relentlessly, trying to extract more information about their captors and their ultimate objectives. Consuela's revelations were fragments of a larger puzzle. She spoke of a clandestine organization with far-reaching influence, one that manipulated individuals like pawns on a chessboard. It was a chilling portrait of a world hidden in plain sight, a world of deception and darkness. The tension between Marco and Consuela remained palpable, their trust in each other fragile at best. But their shared desire for escape forged an uneasy alliance, a partnership born out of necessity rather than genuine camaraderie. With each step, they inched closer to the coordinates that held the promise of freedom, their only lifeline in a treacherous game. Hours turned into days as Marco and Consuela navigated the labyrinth of passages, avoiding their pursuers and deciphering cryptic messages left behind by others who had attempted to escape. The walls seemed to close in on them, and their sense of isolation grew. In their darkest moments, Marco and Consuela found solace in each other's company. They shared stories of their pasts, their dreams, and their fears. Marco learned that Consuela's life had been marked by tragedy and manipulation, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for the woman who had once been his captor. But empathy could not erase the uncertainty of their situation. The coordinates continued to guide them forward, but they also revealed a disturbing truth. The escape route led deeper into the house, into the heart of the organization's lair. As they reached the final set of coordinates, Marco and Consuela found themselves standing before a heavy, ornate door. It was a gateway to the unknown, a threshold they had longed to cross. But the door bore a symbol, one that sent shivers down Marco's spine, the symbol of the organization that had held them captive. Their escape had brought them to the epicenter of their captors' power, and they knew that the final confrontation was imminent. The abyss of uncertainty yawned before them, and the choices they had made throughout their harrowing journey would determine their fate. With trembling hands, Marco pushed open the door, revealing a room bathed in flickering candlelight. Figures clad in shadows awaited them, their faces obscured by masks. It was a surreal tableau of enigma and danger, and Marco and Consuela stood on the precipice of a reckoning. As the masked figures closed in, Marco and Consuela realized that their escape had led them to the heart of the organization's power. Their resolve would be tested as they confronted the true architects of their captivity, and the secrets that had eluded them for so long would finally be laid bare. The labyrinth's end had brought them to the brink of a revelation, a climax in their journey of deceit, danger, and discovery. It was a moment that would define their destiny, and the choices they made would resonate far beyond the confines of the shadowy house that had held them captive. The room, bathed in the eerie glow of flickering candlelight, was a tableau of enigma and trepidation. The masked figures, their identities concealed by ornate and grotesque masks, closed in on Marco and Consuela. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, as though the very walls held their collective breath. Marco's heart raced as he considered the implications of their arrival at the heart of the organization's power. He couldn't help but wonder if they had unwittingly walked into a trap, a final showdown designed to crush their hopes of escape. But he was also driven by a burning desire for answers, for the truth that had remained elusive throughout their ordeal. The figures spoke not a word, their silence a testament to the secrecy and intimidation that shrouded the organization. Marco and Consuela stood in the center of the room, their backs to the ornate door they had entered through, their escape route now blocked. As the masked figures closed in, Marco's thoughts raced. He knew that he had to remain calm, to choose his words and actions carefully. Their survival depended on it. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling only slightly. The figure at the forefront, wearing a mask that resembled a twisted harlequin, finally spoke, their voice a cold, mechanical tone devoid of emotion. "We are the architects of order, the guardians of secrets, and the masters of deception. You have trespassed into our world, and now you must face the consequences." The cryptic response did little to ease Marco's anxiety. He glanced at Consuela, her eyes wide with fear, but he could see a glimmer of determination within them. They had come too far to be cowed into submission. Consuela stepped forward, her voice filled with a mix of defiance and desperation. "We want answers. You've tormented us, manipulated us. Tell us why." The harlequin-masked figure regarded her for a moment, as though considering her plea. Then, with a subtle nod, they signaled to the other masked figures, who began to remove their masks one by one. As the masks fell away, Marco and Consuela were confronted with a startling revelation. The faces beneath the masks were not those of strangers, but rather individuals they had encountered during their captivity, vulnerable men like Marco and women like Consuela, who had fallen prey to the organization's machinations. The room was filled with a motley assembly of captives, each bearing the scars of their ordeal. Their expressions were a mixture of despair, anger, and resignation. It was a chilling realization that they had been ensnared in a web of deceit spun by their fellow captives, forced to play roles dictated by their unseen captors. One of the former captives, a man with haunted eyes, stepped forward and spoke. "We were pawns in their game, manipulated into doing their bidding. We did what we had to do to survive." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The organization had not only preyed on vulnerable individuals, but had also pitted them against each other in a twisted game of survival. Marco and Consuela were just the latest players in this sinister drama. The harlequin-masked figure continued, their voice filled with a chilling certainty. "You have glimpsed the depths of our world, but there is more to discover. We have the power to destroy lives, to reshape reality itself. You can choose to remain a part of our intricate design or to leave this world behind forever." The choice hung in the air like a weighty secret, a decision that would determine the course of Marco and Consuela's destiny. They were faced with a crossroads, a choice between the devil they knew and the uncertainty of what lay beyond. Marco, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, turned to Consuela, seeking guidance in this moment of profound decision. Their journey of deception, danger, and discovery had brought them to this pivotal moment, and the path they chose would resonate far beyond the confines of the shadowy house that had held them captive. With a resolute nod, Consuela made her decision clear. "We choose freedom," she declared, her voice unwavering. The room fell silent, and the masked figures regarded them for a moment. Then, with a solemn nod, they stepped aside, allowing Marco and Consuela to pass through the ornate door and into the unknown. As they emerged from the depths of the house, they were greeted by the cool night air and the distant sounds of the city. The realization that they had escaped the clutches of the organization was both exhilarating and terrifying. They were free, but they were also forever changed by the harrowing journey they had undertaken. The labyrinth's end had brought them to a revelation that transcended the confines of the house. They had glimpsed the dark underbelly of a world where manipulation and deception held sway, but they had also discovered the resilience of the human spirit and the power of choice. Marco and Consuela stood on the threshold of a new beginning, their pasts and their captors behind them. They knew that their journey was far from over, that the echoes of their ordeal would linger, but they were determined to forge a future marked by truth and freedom. As they walked away from the house that had imprisoned them, they held hands, their fingers entwined as a symbol of their unity and their shared determination to leave the shadows and deceit behind. The night sky above them was a vast canvas of stars, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of hope.